Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of the PTNW podcast. I'm your co-host, Arik Karim.
I'm your other co-host, Jeremiah Alondra.
And today we'll be joined by our guest for this episode, Jacob Ryabinky. Welcome to the show, Jacob.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on today.
So Jacob, what's one thing you're looking forward to this week?
Well, I'm actually designing some graphics for the podcast, including, the banner for the YouTube page and some other stuff. So it's gonna be pretty cool.
That's great.
I find it fun because, you get to brainstorm the ideas and you actually get to see it formulate and you get the end result, which is usually satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Art is a very prevalent thing that we're seeing nowadays.
Exactly. And it's just another skill you can improve. And sometimes it can even be like not you don't even have to focus on it. You can like doodle and you're still gonna improve. You can look around your room, just draw some objects. And it also, just all ties in because you can use that in like a graphics design standpoint too.
Yeah.
Use different objects and then you know how to draw them and create them. So like it's a great skill to have. And it's something that you can further right now, as you said. So, like, are you guys doing anything similar to that?
Yeah. Well, I've been working on my cooking. I don't know if that's really similar to it, but I think cooking has been a thing for me during the pandemic and all that, and it's really gotten to be a very fulfilling hobby, kind of similar to graphic design, I guess.
I mean, it's art in its own sense. You know?
Yeah.
And I cook a lot too. And honestly, my favorite part of the process is you'll like you like a food and you want to cook it at home, obviously,
Mhm.
and you'll look up the
Of course, yeah.
recipe, right? And then you get to cook it, and then afterwards you kind of know the recipe after you cook it a few times, and you can even like dip on the recipe and kind of remove parts you don't like or add different things, and then you stop needing the recipe and you can do it from your head, and at that point you can add in the creativity.
There's a lot of wiggle room for like your own additions. That's very interesting.
Exactly. I think it's a lot more fun and whatnot to do that than rigidly follow the recipe. Even the first time around, sometimes you'll look on your kitchen, you might be missing an ingredient, and then you'll replace it, etc.
Mhm. Yeah, and art's really centered around creativity. It's something that is developed from like a standard that everybody like will learn, like concepts that people will learn, and then they'll start to deviate from that concept. They'll start to develop their own concepts, and that in itself becomes like a form of art.
Exactly, and like the recipe, you learn these rules for drawing and painting, whatever type of art you do, and then afterwards you obviously use your creativity and you can innovate upon those rules. And it's like the cliche, like you learn the rules before you break them,
Mhm,
but once you break them, then you actually bring in a lot of the creativity,
mhm.
and then you can kind of like the recipe, you can combine kind of different artistic components and make a new product.
Yeah, for me, I particularly enjoy videography and photography, especially now. I've had a lot more time to do that, and I'm also like really enjoying like that aspect. And even with this podcast, really working on it has been like a joy. It's kind of taken my mind off of what's been happening with the world, and it's really given me space to create something that I didn't really think was possible in a world before we had so much free time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Normally, you have conversations with your friends,
Yeah.
and sometimes they can get pretty interesting. And the podcast just allows you to, any sort of podcast just allows you
There's a
to.
lot of mobility. Yeah. Speaking of graphic design, I've got a question for you because I'm very curious. What's your favorite parts about graphic design? What's so appealing about it to you?
It's an interesting question, and again, I think it's you slowly see your designs and your art just come together. So you start with an idea
Mhm.
in your head, and then if it's feasible,
Yeah.
you'll sketch it out on the paper, and then you might not like it in that state, but then as you move along, you might, you experiment with colors and you experiment with different shapes and designs and etc. And then eventually, it's just so satisfying just to all see it come together. And with that, it's also
Mhm.
like a learning experience. So the next time around, you can actually do that way quicker and way easier because you already know, what colors work together and you know what shapes look good and you know this design and that design and you just slowly iterate upon the process and then it just becomes like a science.
Now,
Yeah.
articulate. On the topic of graphic design, let's talk about yearbook because I feel
Mhm.
that like yearbook is a very big part. Graphic design is a very big part of yearbook. So I mean,
Mhm.
what's your favorite part of yearbook?
Well, like for instance, me and Arik, we were
Uh,
talking a few weeks ago about like what if we could like borrow design elements from like National Geographic or something, put it in the yearbook. Like I don't know if we could actually do that, but it's just sounds fun because uh, you have these ways to express the text and images and different like graphics and whatever and information in so many ways that it's just very I don't know how to say it, but it's very fun to come up with new ways to express this. And a lot of times when I'm reading like magazines and stuff like that, it's fun to see elements that I could include in the yearbook, and I think they would look great on the yearbook and they
Yeah.
would work well, etc.
In my opinion, like the thing that's unique with yearbooks in general that you don't really see with like any other form of publication is just seeing the entire year put into one book, all of the elements,
Hmm.
like the articles, the copy, right, and the photos that really encapsulate certain aspects of like I don't know, like classes, majors, things like that. It all comes together into
Hmm.
one great result, and that's not really something that we see in other forms of like writing or publications.
Because you can reminisce over the year, and
Exactly.
it lets like
uh,
like we say, like you can buy the yearbook now, and then
Mhm.
when you're in high school or college or even further on, you can look at it and your brain will see the pictures sometimes, and it just kind of brings up the old memories. So even if it's not a memory specific to that moment, you'll still remember memories from that school year, for instance, and it just lets you remember a lot easier. And
Yeah.
it's basically just for like the nostalgia. And to a lot of people, it's important, and it makes sense because a lot of people get it in like years which are seen as more important, like let's say that your eighth grade year or your first year in high school or something like that, or your last year, because those are the years that you want to reminisce over. You know what I mean?
speaking of yearbooks, did you guys get your yearbook today?
No, I'm probably just gonna wait till I go back to school or there's another day because I can't go
Oh,
today. But yeah, it kind of ties into
oh.
COVID a bit because like how are we gonna if half the year is like online? What are we? It's gonna be a special year, obviously, to kind of write about because what are if-
Just imagine the copy. It's gonna be like pretty um
exactly.
wild.
So we're just gonna have to try and innovate on it, come up with something that'll work with this year's circumstances.
And we touched a bit on coronavirus though with the copy. So at closing, we were able to tie everything together.
But this yearbook is it's just gonna be way more prevalent with that. Like we probably have a whole section on uh virtual learning or
Right.
something.
And to be quite honest, the beauty of a yearbook, it's because see for newspapers and other publications, it's just like you'll be able to like envision like its end result, right? But with yearbooks, you know what you're working on, but like when you have like that
Hmm.
physical copy,
Well, yeah, it morphs as and it'll change as the year goes on. You can never be sure, of what you're
yeah.
writing.
Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, so it makes it a lot different, and it's also why I prefer being on yearbook than on like newspaper, for
Mhm.
instance.
Yeah, the newspaper yearbook rivalry. I forgot about that.
To be honest, it's not that big of a deal. It's not even. It's just like I appreciate the work that both staffs do, but it's just like yearbooks in a sense, they're like unique in a way that nobody else can imagine. I'm sure. For a bit of context for our listeners, we're all yearbook staffers. So Jeremiah and Jacob, they're both clubs and organizations editors this year. What role are you guys having next year? Have you guys
Yeah.
determined that?
I'm student life.
Student life? Okay, yeah,
Uh,
interesting.
and I'm just general copy editor.
Copy editor, yeah,
It's nice
yeah.
to be overly stringent on everybody's writing.
And
I mean, we can all agree that we're better than the TV crew.
now
True.
they do a lot of good work, honestly, producing something every day.
I much prefer like paper publication. Like TV is kind of just the thing that everybody in our grade or a lot of communications majors. TV is just the thing that they all want to do basically. Well, not all of them, but like it seems like a pretty big part. A lot of people want to do TV, but like
Mhm.
honestly, it's not really my thing.
That's
Uh,
overrated, kind of.
I'm not like it's not like I have like stage fright or anything like that. But because I still do like speech and debate and public speaking,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. It's just that it doesn't something I can't pinpoint what exactly about it is wrong for me, but
I can tell you, as like a former editor in chief, I've been on the staff for like 2 years. I too, my first year was also a clubs and organizations editor. The experience is different, and I don't know if anybody else can feel that difference. There's radio, there's speech and debate, there's TV, but being on like a print public, like working on a print publication, you have like a tangible like result. You have like a physical result of all of your work, and it's put all into like whether that be like 20 to 30 pages for the newspaper or like 100 pages for the yearbook. It all really comes together. For others, it's just either listening to or seeing the result, but it's a little bit difficult to envision yourself and to like see what you are doing yourself. And that's really something that you can only achieve through working on like a print publication or being part of a yearbook or newspaper
exactly.
staff.
That's the beauty of it. Yeah.
It's really enjoyable. Like I again going back to like a traditional magazine. Like I was reading National Geographic, and one of the articles was written by like a college student.
It's accessible too. Like anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can still be then you can write a call or write an article for this prestigious magazine, and then you get photographs for it, and you get to write a cool story about something like in which case in that case it was about COVID and you know uh, life without social interaction, but you get to express yourself in this big
Yeah,
publication, and it just seems like a really cool kind of opportunity to be a contributor to, let's say, National
yeah.
Geographic.
It's very fulfilling. I can say that. So on the topic of just like talking about like
Exactly.
what people have written, at this point I want to transition into literature. Literature has played a very big role in informing us, entertaining us, persuading us about different issues throughout society, or even like delivering like messages and stories. It's played a very big role, especially now. So I just wanted to ask you,
Mm.
both Jacob and Jeremiah, what are some of your favorite books, and what are you like reading right now, and what do you consider is like a very good book that you would recommend other people to read?
I'll start with what I'm reading right now. I'm reading a book about it's a fish called a coelacanth.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard of it. It's called a living fossil fish. So it was thought to be extinct for a long time, and then in like about 50 years ago, or whatever, they started discovering a bunch of stuff about it. Well, even longer. It's been quite a while. Like even the 1920s and 30s, they started discovering it, and one day
Mhm.
someone caught one, and then
Mhm.
they realized it was this fish that was thought to be extinct, a fossil, and it's just a really interesting book about. It's less about it's not like a technical book about all the stuff about the fish and how it fits into evolution and all that. It's more it's more the story of how it came to be and everyone involved, and it's really
Mhm.
interesting how many people are involved and kind of like the drama just surrounding a fish. Like you wouldn't think it'd be that much, but it kind of like took the world by storm at that point, and uh, even like multiple governments got involved, etc. It's a really interesting story over multiple years.
Um, well, I'm reading one of the school books that we were assigned for the summer. It's called the Part-Time Indian book. It's a very controversial
Mm,
book, actually. It's been banned in like 15 counties in the United States because of its anti-Christian, overtly anti-white themes. Uh, it's really a very uh, kind of a powerful book because it evokes all these themes, about society and how we treat the Native Americans in our country. But my favorite book really is this book by Michael Francese
mm.
called Blood Covenant. If you don't know me that well, I'm really into the mafia. I'm very intrigued with the mafia, like the crimes and all the deals and the lifestyle is just so interesting. And it's about Cece and his experiences. He was part of the Genovese family, if I'm not mistaken, and he it's very descriptive of what he did during like the late 1970s, how he scammed the government out of like millions of dollars. So yeah. What about you, Arik?
A book that I'm reading right now is it's called The Circadian Code by Dr. Sachin Panda. It's like talking about how our circadian cycle works, like our body clocks. I personally am like intrigued. I really enjoyed the book. It talked about how we're affected with our circadian rhythm. It's really just an informative book, but I learned a lot. I got a lot out of it, and that's really what I believe literature like does. It helps you understand more about things.
Yeah. On the side note here, uh, I find it really almost distressing that like it sounds just like almost cliche, but like obviously books provide great value to
Yeah.
your life or
Yeah.
to your learning and what you know and all this stuff, and it makes you write better and speak better, etc. But I always find that it's counterintuitive that schools, which are supposed to kind of like promote this, reading and just intellectual thought, but oftentimes,
Mhm.
uh, if you ask someone like why they don't like reading or why they hate books or etc., because a lot of people don't read,
Yeah.
usually it's because schools assign it.
Mhm.
So I always notice that like once, uh, little kids in
Mhm.
elementary school and stuff, once they learn to read, it's almost insatiable. Like they read a lot, even if the books aren't long, they're still reading quite a bit. And then the second you start getting like kind of like a book report type thing in maybe fifth grade or sixth or seventh grade, like it really drops off. Because in elementary school, everyone was reading all these books like Harry Potter, uh, like Percy Jackson, those like long series. And then you get to sixth grade and seventh grade, like us, and eighth grade. Like, not many people read. You ask a lot of people and they don't read. And I think it's a problem because
Right.
schools, they're saying that they're promoting it, but instead everyone hates it. And like some kids will even like pay other
Mhm.
kids to, do their assignments, or they'll look up, like Spark Notes or something like that, like a summary of the book,
Yeah.
which might be fine if you already read the book and you want a better understanding of it. But I think it undermines, actually what you're supposed to get from them. So let's say they assign like the book To Kill a Mockingbird, they assigned for our eighth grade year, and it's a book that you should read because it's pretty influential and themes you should get. But a lot of people or a lot of kids, they'll either
Mhm.
read it and take it as an assignment, which means that they're in kind of like the school mindset and not in the reader's mindset. So it's harder for them to imagine the scenes. It's harder for them to get the themes out of it. They're like almost overly analyzing. And then other kids just plain don't read it and just look up a summary or something, which again is a problem. And then once they add in an essay or an assignment, and you know there's going to be an assignment, there's no, in elementary school we had like free reading, but in middle school and whatever, there's
Yeah.
nothing like that. If the teacher assigns you a book or a story or anything, you know there's at least going to be some kind of packet or essay or book report, something about it. So you read this and uh you see like, oh, there's an essay. So you open the book and then you try and start reading it,
Mhm.
and then you look at the essay and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to write about this. So then you go into your book, and instead of reading it and connecting, all the stories and whatever, you just overanalyze it, and then you have in your brain you kind of mark everything, and you have to kind of write down and take notes about every little aspect that you would need to write about, and just really you don't get anything out of it. It's like the standardized test, like the FSA, the writing portion, and the ELA portion. When you read the stories or passages, usually they're not that great in the
Yeah.
first place, but you get even less out of them because you're underlining,
Right.
you're highlighting, taking notes, which is
Right.
fine for that essay, because the stuff you're reading about that isn't really pertinent. But the second you do that to a good book or an influential book, you just screw with everything. And not only are you screwing up the reading experience, but because your brain is so plastic and it's so able to change, you're actually training the students' brains to think that reading is equal to school. And if they get a bad grade or something, your brain suddenly thinks, "Oh, reading, that's not great." So basically, schools they're not working. They're actually
Mhm.
counterproductive.
Right. And it's really like that mentality that schools establish for, right? Like you have to read this, you have to get like the summary for chapters 1 through 5, and then you're going to take this test. It's really like turning
Mhm.
material that people are supposed to enjoy as literature and turning it into like a basis for determining mastery in the subject. Really, when it doesn't work that way at all. It's quite different.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
Yeah.
honestly, for many people, and I can see why, for many people, it's become something that people either find is a boring class or it's just like not enjoyable at all.
Yeah. And a lot of times also, uh, just one more point is they'll try and standardize something that can't be standardized.
Yeah.
So determining what you get from a book and the metaphors and the themes, a lot of times it's more subjective than objective. Like there might be a main theme that's pretty
Mhm.
obvious, but what you personally get in the book or what your personal values are, which tie into that, that's obviously very subjective. It's different from person to person. And then they'll hand you a test, and it'll make you kind of condense all of that into one answer.
Personally, I find that schools need to draw the line when it comes to determining subjects that can and cannot be standardized, like
Exactly.
through
Yeah.
assessments and such. Language arts is definitely something that you can't just pick up a book, right, read
Hmm.
it, and then just assign it to your students. It's the process for understanding and comprehending the book is very different in contrast to others. Like,
It's like a
uh,
juxtaposition, like they call it language arts, and then you walk into the class and it's nothing of the sort.
exactly. So really in our world, like there's art, there's literature, but both of these have some big thing in common. And that thing is, telling a story. And especially now in these trying times, telling a story, it's never been more crucial. It's sending a message in various ways that people can really relate to, people can really understand. And that's just one lesson that many people can take away when they read a book, when they look at a piece of art. And that's going to conclude today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening in. We really appreciate your support. And you can listen in on SoundCloud and YouTube. that is all for today. Thank you so much for listening.